Jeff, you said a quorum is 4?
For this one, yeah.
Good. Well, we have a quorum.
Hang on one second, Reggie. I'm gonna sign off and sign back on as myself because I show as Calinthia. I was trying to get the ball rolling here.
Great,
So
thanks.
I will jump out and come back in again.
Hello, Hector.
Hey,
I
Hector.
apologize. I've been trying to get in for a bit.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You're not late yet. We have a minute to go.
Oh, okay. Good, because I unfortunately have a bit of a hard stop. Looks like you're going to go to some formal. I just left a meeting and have to get all dressed up for a formal as well.
It's the Gala Hispanica Gala,
30.
right?
Hi.
Is the Gala Hispanica Gala?
Yes, that one. Are you going to be there?
I'm presenting.
Holy moly.
I
Terrific.
presented the award to Abel Lopez. And is it Abel? Do you know how he pronounces his first name?
Abel.
Abel Lopez.
Abel. Yes.
Abel.
You know, Abel was on the commission years ago. When
I know.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of my speech.
Yeah, he's I've known him for years and years, and he has had a life completely dedicated to the arts.
Yeah, you're still in my speech.
Yeah,
That's my speech.
good. And I have nothing but respect for him. You know, I've been on the board of Gala. I had been on the board of Gala for years and years and years. As a matter of fact, I even did set designs. My first encounter with Gala was when I first came to Washington, D.C. 40 somewhat years ago, and I went to see Ms. Margarita's Way, and I had just seen Ms. Margarita's Way on Broadway with Estelle Parsons, and the presentation by Gala was far superior because it was in Spanish, and I really got it. It was the best, and I've been supporting them ever since, so it's been years.
Great. So you and I have the same hard stop at 6.
Oh, yeah.
Since we have a quorum and it's 5:01, should I start? Because I'm not sure if Kimber or Juanice are even coming. We didn't get our RSVPs from people?
I don't think so. But if we have a quorum, I'd suggest starting since you all are.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, and I have my gavel again. So the meeting will come to order. The time is now 5:01 p.m. on Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Executive Committee of the District of Columbia Commission on the Arts and Humanities. My name is Reggie Van Lee, Chairperson of the Commission and Chair of the Committee. Notice of the meeting was posted on the Commission's website, dcarts.dc.gov, and on the DC Office of Open Government's Central Meetings calendar. I will now call the roll. When you hear your name, please answer present. Maggie.
Present.
Juanice. Rona.
Here.
Kimber. Hector.
Here.
Gretchen.
Present.
And myself, present. A quorum is present. This meeting is being conducted remotely using the Cisco WebEx virtual meeting platform and is being live streamed to the Commission's YouTube channel for public viewing. An electronic recording of the meeting will be available for viewing online following the conclusion of the meeting. This meeting is governed by the Open Meetings Act. Please address any questions or complaints arising under this meeting to the Office of Open Government at opengovoffice@dc.gov. I will now read the land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contribute their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We stand on the ancestral lands of the Nacotchtank and the Piscataway people. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events and to use such truths to guide the legacy of the Arts Commission. I would now like to review the agenda and actually assign people to speak to the agenda. It may be a surprise to some of you. First, we're going to start with the capital projects funding, short and long term. I will lead that discussion. Then the PR firm Bain engagement, interactions with the executive committee. I'll lead that as well. then the financials deep dive of available funds, and Kimber was to lead that. If Kimber doesn't make it, we may have to defer that for the next meeting. Office hours for commissioners, I'll lead that. Performance feedback with senior staff, I'll lead that. Handling of sponsorship requests. Gretchen, may I ask you to lead that discussion? Gretchen?
Yes, I'm in the car, so I hope I don't lose you.
Okay, but can you handle the handling of sponsorship requests discussion?
Yes, yes.
Establishment of working protocols and procedures. Rona, can you lead that?
Yes.
I know Hector has a point of view to add to that as well. And then meeting recap and review of action items, I'll cover that. So why don't we start with the capital projects topic? And I'm going to actually read from an email that I sent out to you all earlier. During my vacation in South America, I spoke with Chairman Phil Mendelson, Chair of the City Council, about the possibility of funding for major capital projects for DC arts organizations, potentially on the order of $10 million per request to be provided through CAH. This was prompted by immediate term requests he had received from 3 arts organizations. Those 3 arts organizations were Ford's Theater, Shakespeare's Theater, and Viva. Ford's Theater and Shakespeare were both asking for $10 million, and Viva was asking for $100,000. I explained that neither the size of our current budget nor our paneling process for awarding grants equitably could accommodate the size of these requests or the immediacy for these requests. However, if the City Council legislates additional funding, specifically for capital projects, not subject to the percentage allocations currently in place, we could develop such a program, but we would need to establish an inclusive and equitable process to award such grants. He asked that we investigate ways to address his requests, both in the short term, in response to the 3 arts organizations that approached him, and in the long term, given the likelihood of future such requests to him. Given the gravity of this request, I wanted this to come before the executive committee. Since that time, the update from the chairman said that the Viva request he has accommodated, and that the remaining 2 requests were Ford's Theater and Shakespeare Theater. I don't know if he's waiting for us to resolve the short term or not, but I certainly committed to him that we would have this discussion and see if there's something we can do in the short term and if there's something we can do in the long term. So that's the question before us. Questions, comments, points of view?
Chairman Bentley, could you just clarify any more detail about the specific capital request that's been put forward? In other words, do we know specifically what the $10 million for each of those organizations would be allotted to?
We did not cover that. We did not cover
Okay.
that. I'm sure
then-
we could ask for that information from the chairman, but he didn't share that with me in our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, while I have a great deal of respect for all of the organizations that you mentioned, one of the things that we tried very hard to do in our equity task force, as you well know, is to make sure that we understood specific needs in the community and to understand how we could equitably deploy funding that we have available in our budget, which is very different from whoever asks for the money gets it. So I guess what I would ask is that we could remain within the framework of our equity task force to make sure that we are being very conscientious about making sure the money is deployed to those with critical needs and is being done fairly and equitably.
Gretchen?
Sorry, yeah. Is this additional money that they're giving us for these 3 or 4 groups?
Not sure, because once again, we didn't have a fulsome discussion about it, but it's clear from our existing budget, we don't have 20 million extra dollars. And
Okay.
in the conversation, there was a conversation about they could legislate, additional money to us. But my concern was even if they gave us $100 million, we would have to still, as Maggie said, follow a legitimate, rigorous process by which to distribute that money, to determine who all is available, not just those who happen to have placed the call into my office or the chairman's office or whatever, and to follow a process that we could shine light on and be comfortable that it was a good process. So that was
Right.
the conversation we did have.
And I think that if that's the case, if they're giving us extra money and we do this, to me, if we do it the right way, we can get a lot of good press and out of this by setting up a system.
You broke off, Gretchen. We lost
I'm
you.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you said setting up a system, and then I think we lost you.
Oh, setting up a system so that we take what we have in the demographic overview component at the front end for grants and really pump it up so that these organizations would have to get a full status of where they are now, come up with a timeline, whether it be 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, so that they actually fulfill the requirements that substantiated in the task force as being necessary for grant making.
Good. I think Hector's name was next, and then Rona.
Okay, I think Gretchen has actually hit upon the marks that I wanted to talk about. However, at the same time, I think we need to still establish an equitable system that they're going to be responsible for, such as how are they going to approach, who are the beneficiaries in the overall community with the work that is going to be done, and to eventually be as responsive to some of those issues that we already have, that we use for granting other support to other organizations. So they cannot be exempted from that, but must be actively responsive to those particular needs that we have identified within the community.
Good, I agree. Rona?
I want to go back to Maggie's point, which I think was really worthwhile. I think we need to understand what these people are asking the money for and how it fits into our our equitable framework, and to see if any other organizations want to do similar projects, because I'm just afraid that it's going to become whoever asks just gets to start getting money from us first. And I just want to really avoid that.
Good.
I'm confused.
Gretchen, you're breaking up. Say it again.
I thought it was for FAB, facilities and buildings improvements.
I guess you could put it in that category. The language he used was capital projects. But yeah, I think it fits in FAB. So it's not as though we don't already give money out for this purpose. It's not as though we don't already have a process by which we give that money out. The question was, for this size of project request, which is larger than we've accommodated, to my knowledge, in the past, and for this urgency around it in the short term, is there anything we can do? And if the answer is we can in the short term, we still should talk about the longer term. And if indeed the city council is going to offer up 20, 30, 40 million dollars for capital projects that we could take and we could distribute, we need to get ready and have that process ready and explained. But I want to get back to the chairman with what we can do either in the short term or the long term, if anything.
Are we going to become fiscal agents in many respects? Are we going to function in such a way? The issue is whether or not that money is going to be given to us project specific, and then based on a system that we establish with them to fund those particular expenses. That becomes a real challenge for us from a vantage point that administratively, we may not have the systems in place. And, obviously, in order for us to move forward in that direction, then we have to be, in a position where is there going to be normally on projects like these, there is a certain amount of funding that can be used to I would say underwrite the particular work that has to be done in order to manage these projects. So those are a lot of different questions that can be posed. And at the same time, we just need to get more. First, we have to get more information from him. What are they for, like everybody else is asking? And then what our resolution would be for that, and then present to him. Because right now we don't know what the intent is of that funding, other than say it's FAB, but how do we manage it?
Well, one approach this could be, we already do FAB grants, right? We
Right,
don't need
yes,
to
true.
develop necessarily, right? The two issues that I keep raising is that amount of money we don't have. But if the city gave us extra money and said it doesn't have to go through the percentages that the other money goes through, it's set aside specifically for capital projects, and we use the same process we used before, we could do this, but I don't see how we could do this year. But that's why I put the experts on so Haran, You may have a way that we can get this done. Haran and
Well,
then Maggie.
thank you, Chairman Banley. I was just going to offer a little bit of context, which is in the past, these types of requests have happened through budget enhancement grants. I think David or Jeff might weigh in, but the largest that I remember us doing that way was about 5 million. And these were competitive grants. We insisted on them being competitive grants. The problem that we encountered back then was that the capital projects took longer than a year, so it wasn't feasible that it even happened in 1 year, even though it was crafted that way. So there ended up being, refund issues and, at least 2 in my memory since I've been at this agency, at least 2 such projects were not completed on time. So if we are indeed considering moving forward with any of this, the timeline aspect needs to be detailed out. And I think it makes sense to request this to be additional money to our budget since we've really our budget is spoken for this year and possibly next with our new project. So that's what I would say.
What I wanted to do
My
was
hand
to
is
have
up
this
again.
discussion. I'm sorry?
My hand is up again. It went down, but it
Okay,
went
I'm
back
sorry.
up.
Gretchen, and Rona's hand is up as well. So
Hey,
Gretchen.
Reggie, can I jump in
Oh,
here
I'm
for a
sorry,
minute?
Maggie. I'm sorry, Maggie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I just have us think about. Number one is that 2 of the organizations that are requesting such a sizable amount of money are recipients of significant private sector funding through endowments. So if you look at their open and transparent financial disclosures, you will see that they receive money from the private sector. That's not an advantage that many arts organizations in the District of Columbia enjoy. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say is understanding the purpose of these grants is critically important because we're living in a time of COVID. So we want to understand what exactly the capital building funding is going to when we have heard unequivocally and universally from the arts community that individuals need support, individual artists, in light of the hardships that they endured during the pandemic. So I would say if we can double down on supporting individuals as good stewards of our taxpayers' money, I would double down on that versus a building or a facility because the need is so acute right now. That's the feedback we're getting.
Good. Thank you. Gretchen and then Rona.
If I go back to, it kind of piggybacks on what Maggie said, but I think if we're going to do it, and I still have ethically, I think, some issues, especially with those organizations that have huge endowment funds, huge endowments. But if we are, then we would have to figure out how to demand that minority, BIPOC folks are hired within a certain period of time for whatever these projects are going to be. That they bring on people of color to whatever components or programming components they have in the next 6 months, a year, whatever. It would have to be that exact for me to feel comfortable about it.
Yeah. I mean, these MWBE stipulations exist in most government-funded capital projects anyway.
Right.
So we could make ours different or more stringent or whatever, but those are just the regular sort of approach now. And I know that because I've done a couple of those. Maggie, are your hands up from board? So I mean, we could talk about this forever, and I don't think we have the time on the agenda to talk forever. But I would like for us to, clearly we have to respond to the chairman. I'd like for us to find a way to describe how this could be done through CAH. I think it is highly unlikely that it could be done this year, but I defer to Haran and David and the grants people if they think there's some way we could do it. But certainly we could lay out a process by which we could do this in future years. But to Haran's point, we'd have to have the funding for it. And to all of our points, we'd have to have a process that when the light is shown on it, everybody will say it was a fair process. We can put in criteria about to what extent does a grantee have the opportunity to get this money from endowments and other sort of donors, because those that don't have other places to go should be preferred over those that do. To what extent are we going to require them to have MWBE designations in the contracting and in the labor and all that sort of stuff? So all of that we could define in a process. But I turn back to Ron and David and say, hearing what you've heard, how can we best respond to the chairman?
David, I've already spoken. I'm happy to follow if you want to sort of jump in.
You were, yeah, no, Haran, everything you said was completely accurate. The huge concern is moving a large amount of money in a very short period of time. I'm assuming these are large construction projects, and there are phases, to construction projects, and we did. There were two organizations that had multi-million dollar awards from us that had to return the bulk of the money to us. So that is a huge concern. And the concern over sort of hiring, the hiring practices. Any award that we issue that is over $300,000 is has to go through the first source process. So an organization would work with the Department of Employment Services to ensure any contractors or subcontractors are reporting monthly on their hires and ensuring that, as the name might suggest, they are hiring local first or DC first. So.
Good. So if you all could draft our response that covers all the points we talked about, what we think is doable, under what conditions, what perhaps isn't, et cetera, for it to be reviewed by the executive committee by email, then I'd like to get back to the chairman with some response in short order.
Sounds
So,
good.
yes, for the record, I would love to fund capital projects for organizations in the district that need and deserve it. So the notion of capital projects, extending FAB is something I'd love to do. It has to be affordable for us. And if they give us the extra funds, the city being they, then fine. And it has to follow the right sort of process. So I think that we can lay out is how we could address his question. Any other? Ronnie, your hand is up again.
Yes, I have a question. David, how much did we have with that fiasco with Studio Theater? How much did we give to them where we had an issue?
5 million.
So yeah, it was, I think it was 4.5, just under 5 million. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope we've learned some lessons from them, and when we do stipulations of how they spend their money, we have a really strict accounting process for that. Can you write that into the requirements?
Yes, and I think with the two organizations that ran into challenges, it was just the length of a construction project. It was, they're oftentimes multi-year projects. So yeah, we can reference that in what we create. I am curious, and I know, Maggie, you said that you were curious about, the nature of the projects, that if there's some way of these organizations bringing other organizations under their roof, as has been done recently with some larger organizations, that that would be of interest to me. Just but again, it's knowing the nature of the project. So.
I also think I think it would be useful to know, David, if maybe you guys could gather this, if we could have a historical look at the amount of funding each of these organizations has received and how that is proportionate to other organizations in the District of Columbia. You can also look at the audience analysis. What is the subscribership? Does it reach a broad section of the city? I mean, we are called to be stewards of our whole city and all of our residents. And so what we are hoping to do as part of the equity work is to make sure that we are working in service of a large portion of the city. So I think that information would be very important in our analysis and our feedback to Chairman Mendelson, because I know that is his goal as well. He has said to us that he wants to serve the whole city. So let us do that. But let's see the analysis. Let's see where the facts guide us.
We can pull that together.
Perfect.
So,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I was told this was a public meeting and the chairman invited me to sit on it. Does that allow me to ask the question?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. I was in another meeting and I didn't hear all of it, but I heard some of it. So we're looking at money for capital projects?
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Is the money designated to a specific group or is it just in general capital projects?
No, the request was from the chairman was three organizations, it became two organizations for a specific thing. I committed to get back to him with what we might do or could do in the short term and the long term. And this conversation has moved it to, if you give us the extra money, we can distribute it, but it has to follow the process and all the concerns, addressing the concerns we talked about. So we are not inclined to give money to a specific organization just because they called and made the request. It has to go through a process. Does that answer your question, Cora? Did I lose you? So looks like Hector's hand is up, Rona's hand is up, and Maggie, is your hand still up, or is that from before?
I'm lowering my hand, thank you.
And Rona's hand's gone down. So Hector, you're the one hands up.
Yeah, my only question is, how do we make sure that this does not morph into potential reduction in terms of the allocation that is given to the commission that is presently we have, that it doesn't then become reapportioned again so that it has the semblance of what we had to disband already, that organizations that have sufficient, how would you say, contacts can actually go get money, and that money is subtracted from the commission money that we are already giving out equitably. Because it to me, it's just a matter, how do we prevent that doesn't happen again, that sort of thing.
So that question is beyond the knowledge of this witness. I'm not sure how we prevent funding to be changed from coming from the city.
I know,
don't know.
well, there's a formula right now, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of that we have to memorialize that formula so that anything above that formula, then it's treated separately by the act of the council.
Right. No, I agree. But as we know, the Budget Support Act before created an CAH and created all sorts of stuff, and that was changed. So I don't know how we can require, we can't require that the legislation stay the way it is. We can complain about it, we can, make noise about it, we can advocate sort of things, but that's my point. I don't know if the city council and the infinite wisdom decided to redistribute the whole thing, I don't know what we could do to change it other than speak up about it.
So are we actually saying that this could be another beginning of another CAH situation where money is given to people with no competition, no accountability? Are we doing that again?
I don't know.
We don't know, that's the
I
question.
don't know. And
I know.
but let's not take this conversation too far. I don't want to mire in the hypotheses. We know what we stand on. And if somebody comes forth with something different that we don't like, we'll object to it, just as we objected to the Budget Support Act and eventually got it changed. So I don't want to be chasing ghosts around this thing.
Right, very well.
I agree. We'll watch it.
Yeah, yes, watchful eyes. So Haran and David, when do you think you could prepare a draft of our response for this executive committee to review?
David is gone after tomorrow, so Jeff and I will work on it. Let me circle back. Maybe I can email you right out. It'll be soon, the next few days.
I just want to be able to get back to the chairman and let him know when we'll respond, because I don't want to be guilty of, taking his request lightly or ignoring it as he perhaps has done with me.
Yes. I would say Monday, end of business Monday, because we have a couple of people out of office between now and then. What was I going to say? Yeah, we can do that, I feel like.
Good. Can we move on to the next topic? The next topic is a PR firm. As we know, we have engaged an outside firm to help us with our public engagement, both from a strategy standpoint and from an execution standpoint. I distributed to each of you the scope of work that they provided. Those of us who'd read it before, at least I had one concern that not go off in its own direction around a strategy, around issues that had nothing to do with public engagement and communications issues facing us at the moment. And so I think that we're having that conversation with the consulting firm to make sure that that's aligned. They will have a list of all of our activities and make sure that their recommendations and actions align with that. But I wanted to get you all's reaction to what you read, because I'd like for this executive committee, with the addition of two other commissioners who signed up for the Ad Hoc Communications Committee, which, as I recall, was Cora and Carla, to be someone that interacts with this firm, to act almost as a client in directing some of the work of that firm and interact with them. So they would have periodic interactions with us and report to us, and we'd be helpful and they'd be helpful to us. That's the plan. But I didn't want to get started on the wrong foot. So any other reactions you all had to the statement of work or any other points of view you want to share now, let's get that in the hopper up front. Reactions?
This is Gretchen. I'm not comfortable with how it did not go in depth with getting the word out for grant funding opportunities. I
Lack
think
specificity.
Yeah, a number of people observed that the grants piece should be more prominent. And I don't think they don't want to do it. I just think it wasn't emphasized in the statement of work, and we need to fix that. But I don't know, Haran, do you have a different point of view?
I think the update from the feedback we've provided is that they would be able to focus on 3 grants, and we've identified the eStarts, the relief grants, and possibly one other that they're able to support us with.
excuse me, 3 grants of all of our grants?
This year, right now, yes, Gretchen, of the ones that are open and active, they've said that Jeff, would you like to weigh in, as you're the one who's been talking to them? But yeah, they've said they can support up to 3 grants.
Yes, well, so what they're thinking is identifying the 3 main grants that probably need the most support, and to get the word out that, maybe are not the best known or don't have the most, returning, applicants, and that we want to, push out and that are applicable to the widest audience. So the relief grant is certainly one of those because it's so, open to so many people and it's an easy application. And, the idea being that because, we have multiple grants open at the same time, that, you bring them into the website for one, and they see the rest of them that are there as well, that they might be able to take an interest in. That's the thinking behind it anyway.
I think that should be, yeah.
Go on, Hector, sorry.
Yeah, the language in the different communities. I don't think there was very much of a narrative on how to reach to a broader community, as well as those individuals going into the website. Is it accessible in different languages for those individuals who are not only English speaking, but how could they participate in this process? That was not something I think that was dealt with effectively, or even on some of the nitty gritty. And by the way, I realize that we had to respond in a 2-day time frame, but that's a very big document and there's an awful lot of ideas. Frankly, I think there's a process in which they can come to us to have a discussion with us, and we could actually have a dialogue with them, not just a matter of throwing things at them. We could have a discussion so they could understand how we feel the challenges are from our perspective, and really have a dialogue with them in that sense.
Okay, Rona's hand is up, but first, Jeff, can we gather up these reactions and share that with the Bain people?
Yes, yeah.
Good.
And
Okay,
we
Rona?
can schedule a meeting whenever works for your all schedule.
Good. I think that because this is an important topic, and I was a consultant forever, and sometimes you got to spend a little time with the client to really understand, and it may be all doable, but in the absence of a conversation, you don't know. So since we're early in the process, I'd like us to gather up this reaction, set up time with them, have a real discussion with them, and see if we can all be on the same page around the scope of work. I'm sorry, Rona?
I was trying to do a thumbs up to Hector. Sorry, and I pressed the question. So sorry.
We have a hand wait for Maggie.
I do think that, part of it is this contract should have been in place months ago, but there were, delays that we know of through OCP. And so I think they're, in that catch-up mode because, we're just in that space of the calendar. So trying to do so many things at one time. But yeah, we can certainly, talk to them more and schedule a meeting with this committee and go from there.
But I think gathering up our reactions now and sending that to them so that they don't walk in the room and don't know what issues
Right.
are. So let's
Yeah.
try to narrow the getting to the right answer by providing them our input. So Maggie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, there are some operational elements in the plan, but I think we need it to be strategic. And we have two documents that can guide the framing of a strategy. One is the task force plan, obviously, and the second is some of the strategic plan work that we did for both the committee as a whole, but also for public art. So I think what they need is, what is the strategic prioritization of activities? You know, we don't need a flurry of activity. We need it to be thoughtful and strategic. And that's where this group can guide that. And that conversation is so important.
Right. And they are in receipt of all those documents, the task force recommendations, the strategic plan, and the public art master plan renewal was all part of their packet when they responded to the solicitation. So they have that information.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's not reflected in the plan that they've offered us. So I think we need to help shape that with them.
Mhm.
As Reggie said.
They had those two plans as input. And maybe what we need them to do is to do check marks against their activities and where that addresses things in the plan, so we can see it explicitly, because it may be in there inherently. They may feel it's in there, but if we don't see it, we don't feel it. So that's a lot of the input for them against those documents in particular.
That makes sense.
Welcome, Kimber and Quinice. Thank you. Any other feedback on the plan? Jeff, do you have what you need to share with them?
I think so, yeah.
And then you'll set up a meeting?
Yeah.
So Kimber, not to put you on the spot, but the next agenda item would be a financial deep dive on available funds or any other topics around the finances that you'd like to share with the executive committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that stands out to me just more broadly is how intentional this committee really being as the rest of this money moves through, because the likelihood, one, of the importance of getting it out, right? This 9.1, and I mean, we're seeing almost a 20% increase, right, to the budget. And while we know that is not, we're not going to likely see an extra 20% of dollars come in the next few years, I think it's important to set a precedent that we have the ability to digest, get it out, have an impact with it, but also that we can actually leverage it, right? So I think that to the extent that the executive committee needs to move quickly in the feedback that we've gotten of where funds are going to go, and being purposeful, intentional, being able to have a story back to the marketing team around that, like for the PR messaging of how we were able to deploy those funds and have an impact. I think it's going to be just a thought as I dig into the numbers with Brian. It's been interesting to see, like, okay, there's a lot of dollars, right? That delinquent debt sort of created a lot of additional funds, and we've got to have a plan for them, a meaningful plan.
So questions from the executive committee about how we'd like to add more visibility and clarity around the budgets to the full set of commissioners through these committees. So what we don't want to do is to have this big discussion at some level of detail in the big commission meetings, but to have it in the committee meetings. But it starts with you all as the stewards for those committees. And as we said before, to the extent we understand what is available, we can figure out, based on the agenda we have in each of our committees and those parts of the agenda that need funding, how might that funding come forth? Any other questions on that? The next item is office hours for commissioners. I think we are very close, and Haran can confirm that, to finding a space at the commission office that would be an office available for commissioners. Ideally, anytime we may need to come to the office, but certainly once a month or twice a month, or whenever we decide the cadence there, which I'd like to agree upon at this meeting, where we will be there. So if the public want to come and engage with commissioners, we're available for them for that engagement. This is part of the overall engagement process. That was one of the recommendations from the task force as well. And I think we found the space now to do that. And with, I wasn't going to say with COVID calming down, but who knows whether I could describe it as calming down or not. But anyway, with some level of additional comfort that we can have in-person meetings, be they masked or not. I need the commitment from the commissioners that this is something we have real energy and commitment around, because I don't want to set up office hours and none of us are there. And it shouldn't be one person there all the time. We have to offload to others and rotate and tag team and that sort of thing. So let me open up the discussion again about the extent to which we really subscribe to the notion of these office hours for commissioners or not, and can I get commitment from you all, once we decide how often we want to do it, that you'll do your fair share in showing up. So reactions?
Sorry, this is Quanice. Just to clarify, this is in person and virtual office hours, or only in person? You were thinking?
I think we can do both. We can certainly do both. That gives us the flexibility too, especially if, we get another outbreak or, whatever. But I think for some people, they would be more comfortable coming in, and some of us may be more comfortable face to face, and then others may want it virtual. So let's expand it to be both in office and in person and virtual. So Quanice, what do you think? Since it certainly was one of the things that came out of the task force.
Yeah, I think in person is important. I think for my own personal things, because of my schedule, I probably like virtual would work better for me. But I do think being in person and meeting folks and meeting them where they are, I think that's really important too.
Hector? Hector, you're muted.
Okay, the question for me is exactly what role do we play? What answers are we going to be dealing with? How, because, we normally don't consider ourselves, public, I would say, we can't speak on behalf of the commission necessarily, but we could be as part of the commission. The question is, what is it exactly that would be expected of us to do? How do we perform, and what opportunities there are? So how do we define that? Again, it's one of those things where what is the purpose should be defined, so then we know why we're going to be invested. I think it's a great idea, but I just don't want to go there, sit in an office and not really have much interaction or activity, or just wait for someone to call. It is just a matter of knowing what and how I interact.
But I can tell you what the intention was and where I've seen office hours work. It is an outgrowth of the perception by some in the community that we are not accessible, especially the commissioners. And in some cases, that is true. I mean, many of us are not, out there in the community and accessible and that sort of thing. So this was a more organized way, as opposed to us walking the streets and roaming down the streets and into buildings, to have people to come to us. My sense was, while we may not be able to answer a lot of questions on the spot, we can listen, take their input, work within our group for an answer, and then get back to them. So in some cases, we may be able to clarify things. They may have a question about grants that Gretchen could answer. They may have a question about our arts education program that you can answer, et cetera. But to the extent we don't have the answer, we can at least hear the question, be visible, be intentional in wanting to hear their issues, and find a way to get back to them. That's what the intention is of the office hours.
All right, thank you.
Maggie?
Yeah, I'm very open to the idea. I think it's a good idea, Reggie. I actually think it would be really beneficial for us to get to know the team at the agency better as well, to be there with them, because I feel like there's been a bit of a divide. So I think us getting to know the internal staff team and being present with them would be very helpful. I also think that, as we talked about in the task force recommendations, just having a formal mechanism to be able to have people direct questions, a commissioner mailbox, an email or something, virtually, so that we can, as Hector said, we can prepare for those meetings and engagements and make sure that we have sufficient answers to be supportive. So I do think we need some kind of channel where people can reach us, not just by walking in the door.
So how often might we want to have these office hours?
Monthly?
Yeah.
Once a month? And Haran, we can accommodate that, right? From a physical space standpoint. And we'll have to work through the security of people being able to come in and all that sort of thing. Not us, but the people that may want to come for the office hours. We have
Yes.
to sort that out.
Yes, there is a room that we could set aside once a month. It's a spare room for people to also be in for meetings and so on. But we can schedule around that and we can make arrangements. Yeah.
How long is the hour or the hours? Hector, point of view?
That could be flexible, basically, depend. For example, I've had conversations with individuals who have addressed emails to me, like, for example, you referred Mr. Yarborough to me. It was
Right.
a wonderful conversation, wonderful exchange. I think we cleared up a lot of opportunities. I referred him to certain programs, and that went on through a whole different process of multiple communications. So, 1 hour there would not have necessarily sufficed, because obviously we had an exchange. We really had a conversation going on some of his concerns, and I addressed them to the best ability that I could, and referred to go to the education committee for certain answers that they need to do on certain programmatic issues. So yeah, it serves, but it's kind of hard to define. You have to be, it could be also a meeting place that if someone wants to have a broader discussion with you, that you could invite him in and have him or her in to have the discussion at the commission, but also bring in a member of the team that could actually help resolve those issues.
But I think we have to be clear with people that says every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month from noon to 2 are the office hours. We have to be clear. We can't just make
I
it.
like that idea. Yeah, that's.
I also think we should rotate. So I don't know if we want to do like one day monthly, like every first Tuesday, could be 12 to 2. But then we have another time that's after hours, that's virtual, because people like me who are working won't necessarily have time to, meet during the day.
I like that.
Right.
I like that.
Yes.
Great
I like
idea.
I
that
also
too.
wonder, Reggie, just another thought around this concept, and I love the idea of like having a set time, and maybe it's, the first Tuesday, and like Quincy is saying that we have some evening hours that are virtual for people to plug into, but also like as meet the commissioners in the wards, like, right? Because I think this idea of accessibility and access isn't just limited to the space. And so is there a forum where when there are, particularly around the public art or openings, that there's an opportunity for commissioners to be present and for that to be known, so that it's clear when we're there as well that that's also an opportunity in the city to be visible and engaging and listening to the community in those spaces too.
Yeah, I mean, that is clearly in Bain's work plan. I mean, in their work plan, they are explicit about us going out into the community. And that's another whole scheduling thing that could be, interesting. So I'd rather give that to them to work with us to do that. But I'm trying to figure out where can we just set every Tuesday, noon to 2, I'm sorry, every first Tuesday of the month, noon to 2, and every first Tuesday of the month, virtually 6 to 8, or 5 to 7, or something like that. And see how it goes.
Yeah, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and if we don't get any demand, we can shut it down, but let's sort of see how it goes. So is 12 to 2 good for people? Since that's lunchtime, at least you can squeeze out during lunch, or
would y'all want to have an online sign-up sheet in advance, like half-hour blocks or anything like that we could?
That would be great.
That sounds good.
That would be great.
Also, I was and should we say the name of a commissioner, or if they're in a particular area on the commission, because somebody who wants to talk about public art may not want to talk to somebody who's in finance, that kind of thing. So should we have maybe the signups specifically geared to the commissioner or members that are going to be there?
Yeah. And Haran?
I was going to suggest, along with the sign up idea, that we at least fill up all the slots for the next 3 months or so that we can sort of put that out there with all the, sort of bells and whistles, this person, this background, this committee chair, all of that, and roll it out maybe at one time after the sign up is complete.
Well,
But also, we could also be, if we say every second Tuesday from 12 to 2 and 5 to 8 or whatever the evening hours are on the same day, we could diversify the specialties of each commissioner, so that in the daytime, if you want to come talk about the finance or the public art, and in the evening, if you're interested in the idea committee or what's going on with grants, then you could speak with blah, blah, blah. So we'll have various focuses that will make available on that day. So they don't have to wait the next month for the next thing to happen.
Right. And recognize it doesn't have to be just one commissioner there. It could be multiple commissioners together.
Right.
And back up to if I get sick or something, it's not as though the room is empty. that you have somebody, you have 2 or 3 people signed up, and hopefully all 3 will show up, or at least 1 will show up. So how do we take this to orchestrate this? I'm sorry, Gretchen.
Logistical question. If there's only one room that we're designating, maybe 2 or 3 commissioners of different disciplines are there with who want to talk with them. Do we have enough space to accommodate that?
Ron, how big are these rooms that we may have available?
The room isn't that big, but we could conceivably use the front of the sort of in the gallery space or something other.
Or even reserve the multi-purpose room.
Right.
Which is
We can find room. That's the short answer. Yeah.
Okay. Quanish, you're making a suggestion about weekends?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because I know sometimes people after work don't or cannot make it or cannot or just exhausted. So weekends, I think too would be a good option for some folks. You're probably not going to get as many, but I think that's still good to have those options for different people because we're trying to meet folks where they are. So I think it would be good to have just like a weekend day, maybe once every couple of weeks too.
And I'm saying, let's try this, right? There's no guarantee what's going to work. Let's see what the demand is. Let's see if we learn. Let's decide later whether this is a waste of time or whether we can shape it into something good. But I have had this experience before and it can work, and I'd like us to try it at least. So how do we go from this conversation to regimenting it? Is that something, Haran, you and staff can take, or do you need me to do that, or?
Yes, we will need, we're maxed out at this point. So I think what we can do is maybe create a sign up sheet and start with that, hand it over to someone who can help get commissioners signed up, and then we can go from there.
Okay. I mean, I'll do the duty of getting people signed up.
Okay.
But if you can orchestrate have the room there.
Yeah.
The dates, the first Tuesday. So do you want to go at the first Tuesday every month in the day, noon to 2 in the office, and in the evening, virtual? Just so there's no confusion. It's Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month, right? That keeps it simple. And what time, Quanisha, to be in the evening?
Probably like 5 to 7.
Okay. So that's going to be the sign up sheet stuff. And I'll orchestrate getting people in there. And then the communication out to the world that we're doing this is something either the staff or Bain would do, right?
Yeah, are we giving them the option of in-person or virtual?
Yeah, that's what we said. So there will be the first Tuesday of every month from noon to 2 in the office, from 5 to 7 virtual. And they can sign up where they want to sign up. Are we good? I know time is short. The next item is performance feedback with senior staff. These are sensitive topics, but I hope that we can receive it in the spirit it's intended. As we think about where the commission wants to be and wants to go, obviously, we'd love to have an organization that we describe as a high-performing organization. And high-performing means people are motivated, people understand what their work is, we have qualified people doing the work, they're compensated well, all that sort of stuff that would define high performance. And the second thing is we have great aspirations through our collective agenda to not just be, the run-of-the-mill agency and to be as good as others, but to be the very best and be the leader. And so both things that came out of the task force and other things we're trying to do are trying to position us for being that sort of beacon on the hill, that Ford Foundation version of a state arts agency, right? In my talking with all of you, and I've spoken to all of you and spoken with some other commissioners, there have been suggestions around how we could move better into those two spaces. Concerns people have or opportunities to do things different. I shared this with Haran and David, and Jeff wasn't in those meetings, so was Haran and David. Some issues I've heard, concerns I've heard from staff about not feeling motivated, from staff about being concerned that they're not people who get preferred treatment over other people in the staff, complaints that don't seem to be addressed in the right sort of way. And of course, there are always 3 versions of every story. I get that, right? But I think that we have to find a way to have those conversations with the staff, and where people are being objective and fair and have real concerns that need to be addressed, that we're addressing those in some sort of way. I think that Haran and David have taken that feedback, have digested it, and are coming back with how they feel they want to address that. We can talk about that today, or we can talk about that in another meeting. Similarly, grabbing onto the collective agenda and not just in how we get things done, but the energy around which and the proactivity around which we get those things done, sending the message that we're on board with these changes and driving things forward. That stuff doesn't take forever to do, that we don't have to negotiate constantly to get things done, that there's this real energy around moving forward with things. And again, I think that feedback was digested by Haran and David, and they have a proposed plan for how they deal with it. But what I didn't want it to be was just Reggie having this conversation with the senior staff. I wanted the executive committee, to the extent you have a point of view on this, to the extent you see opportunities, to the extent you see challenges or concerns, for us to share that in open forum to get to a solution. The goal isn't just to be punitive or to complain or wring our hands, but rather to go beyond the problems to some solutions. So I invite the executive committee now to opine on this point of view, both whether you agree or disagree, and what you think the issues are and what you think the opportunities are to address them. And Haran and David as well to participate, and Jeff, in that conversation.
Actually,
Maggie?
I do have a process question. So several months ago, there were some performance issues that I was getting a lot of feedback about. And I think my understanding was that, Haran, you prefer that all of those pieces of feedback not go to you directly, but get channeled through the chairman. Is there an established process for, because I don't think it's the role of the commissioners to manage agency staff. It should never be, because of our the way that our governance is configured. But I'm curious what the established process is when these things are percolating. How do you get them remedied?
Maggie, I'm not aware that the chairman of the commission is involved in receiving or being the channel for these personnel issues. I am the personnel head for the agency as designated by DC government. DC government does have, sort of a DC HR structure around that. And
Haran, I'm sorry. When I've had issues that people have raised with me about support they are getting or their calls aren't being returned, I had reached out and you kind of had suggested to Reggie that you didn't want to be in the position of getting that feedback directly from commissioners. That
I see.
But I was never told of an established process. So I just need to understand, and I think everyone on this executive committee needs to understand that when they're getting feedback about lapses in execution, how do those get put forward? Is there an official process? And if so, what is it?
Are you, okay, one last question about clarity. Are you speaking about commissioners having feedback for me specifically? Is that the question? Because if that's the question, yes, they should channel through Reggie because he's the direct report. He's my direct supervisor. And so that has been the process or the channels in the past.
Yeah, no, when I had an issue on public art and I was getting a lot of feedback from other commissioners about things that were not being executed to their expectation, I reached out to you and you thought that it was inappropriate to talk directly with me about the feedback I was getting from several commissioners. And so you didn't want to do a meeting. And so then I kind of didn't know where to go with the process. And then you eventually said, okay, I'll do this one time. But I don't think everyone is aware of what the process is. So if we get the feedback, for example, I run a committee. If I get feedback about execution not being sufficient, should I go to Reggie with that feedback? Or do I go to you as executive director when things need to be better managed?
So the process has been, up until now, the process has been that people provide feedback to the chair. The chair is my immediate supervisor. I would get the feedback from the chair.
And I've provided lots of feedback that's come from a number of you all, but sometimes it loses something in the translation. And so I was trying to use this forum with me here for you to provide any concerns or opportunities that you want to present now, with it not always having to channel through me and me trying to remember exactly what you said, to use the right language or the right intonation, et cetera.
Call on Rona to respond to some of those things.
I'm sorry, Rona.
Yeah, that Maggie, That's a very good point, and it's a segue into what the governance committee is doing. We are writing a manual just on that, on communications, on commissioner feedback, on public feedback, and how things are going to be responded to, and the interaction between staff and commissioners. And that's coming up at our next governance committee meeting. And that's exactly what's been a problem. Reggie, can I go into Hector's
Yes.
concern?
Yes.
And the other concerns we've had from commissioners who are just starting is the onboarding. So when people are giving responsibilities, as Hector is to be secretary, he is not given the proper help or communication about what is going on. And an example is he can't get an email at 12:19 sending him a memo at night and expect it to be read and delivered the next day. As well, as well as when we expect certain memos and agendas to go out and people want to speak at our meetings, that all has to be funneled to Hector. And that has to be really a process, which we don't have. And I want to put into the governance committee a handbook.
If I could speak for myself on the issue that Ron is bringing up, it's not a matter of it being funneled to me. It's just a matter of being funneled through a particular channel. Remember, I am not paid member of the team. I am a volunteer. So I can't be the one that gathers up all the information in secretary, because that is mostly a position that, yes, I will have some level of gathering information and making sure it's proper. But as a gathering place for all the agendas, that's a full-time job and one that, is rather difficult. So yes, we need to establish a proper protocol for that, because frankly, that's not my understanding what this position of secretary would be, to be in a situation where everybody funnels to me and I have to create an agenda. The agenda comes from the chairman. We propose an agenda. All the items that have to be discussed are centralized, then presented to the secretary and to the chairman for approval, and then it moves forward. And for me to go out and send out information at a certain time to all board members, that's a real challenge for me. And frankly, not something that was defined at any point as to what the responsibilities were, how to gather information. If I get an email, how do I distribute that information? What emails and what types are fair for me to put out? Are they commercially driven, or are they? Those are all the questions that I actually have, of which I have no answer right now because there wasn't any onboarding. So yeah, there are certain questions that I do have, and rather than making it such, I think that a lot of it can be resolved, but it has to be defined, because somebody else coming in the position, I don't think it's fair for them to have to kind of muddle their way through.
Ron?
So Hector, for clarity, are you speaking about onboarding as a commissioner, or are you speaking about this new role of secretary and the
Both.
sort of defining the role?
Both.
So may I ask, is the Mayor's Office on Talent, has MOTA been a part of any of your onboarding? I know we've had the Bega piece, but when you were first appointed, was that a part of anything you've done?
No. MOTA has not contacted me about anything, but I would assume that the agency that absorbs me would be the one that is responsible for saying that, because MOTA, I don't think, is attuned to all the details of what this organization is all about, just like you probably are not as familiar with everything that MOTA has to do. So I think it's inherent in the agency in which one is put into as a commissioner or as a volunteer to take that role and be in a supportive role, saying this is how you can best serve, and this is what we do. This is how we're going to work. These are things that you need to know.
Yes. Yes.
If,
No.
if I may, if I may, I don't want us to venture into finger pointing.
Yeah,
This
neither
is
do
a
I.
problem, needs to be addressed. If we can pick it up and have governance to
Yeah.
define that and take it over, that's the way to do it.
Yes.
I feel privileged that when I became chair, I was given this document and had a full hour with the senior staff. But it's clear that the onboarding of commissioners in general, and certainly as people move into office or positions, needs a lot of work. And if governance is willing to take that on, I think we should take it on.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are.
Now, I apologize, it's 6:04. I know we
Yeah,
didn't
I gotta go.
all these topics, but my script says we're at the end of our allotted time. The remaining agenda items, and that is continue the performance feedback with senior staff discussion, talking about handling of sponsorship requests, and finishing the establishment of working protocols and procedures, will be taken up under unfinished business at the next meeting of the executive committee. I
Excuse
thank
me,
you.
Reggie,
Yes.
sorry, but one specific sponsorship request, by the time we have the next meeting, it'll be, I don't know how you want to handle it.
The sponsorship request, is that only the purview of the executive committee, or is that something that the full commission would have to address anyway?
I thought that there was money within the budget that was discretionary. I don't know which account it's called now, that it used to be discretionary, that the executive director and the chair or the executive director, chair, executive committee could make a decision up to a certain amount of money for sponsorship.
You're right,
don't-
Gretchen. Yes. Yes, it was that way in the past. It has been basically allotted for outreach opportunities, marketing opportunities, and there's an intake form on the website through which we've been operating. But if you remember, the last time that we put a pause on it was to be able to discuss it and come up with a policy. We said, you know, up to this amount might be the discretionary, and beyond that amount might be a committee conversation. I think that's the last place we left it that I remember.
Okay, because I sent a letter in, but at this point, I mean, I don't know what to say to these people because their event's in June and Ward 8.
Okay, let's follow up on the back end and see how we can talk through it.
Okay.
I apologize, Gretchen. I thought that topic was on our agenda just to get input or advice from the executive committee, but the handling of that was prescribed as something that the executive director and the chair would address.
Well, however we handle it, when I just heard you say we should talk about it at the next meeting,
Let's pick up from there then. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what made me push back because I know this event's happening before the next meeting.
Okay,
Well-
but so even if the next meeting, we're talking about how it was handled and how it should be handled going forward, but before that time, Haran and I will address it.
Perfect, thank you.
Is that fair? Good. So with that, I thank you. The time is now 6:06. There being no further business before the committee, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Enjoy your dinner.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.